Just when you think things can't be any more dramatic with the Vallow-Daybell case, Mark Means tries to cause a ruckus. We all know there was a hearing last week regarding the defense counsel's request to remove Rob Wood from the case. He is currently the special prosecutor assigned to this case of JJ and Tylee. We spoke about his visit to Chandler, Arizona, where there was a conversation between himself and Zulema Pastinas, who is Alex's former wife for 10 minutes, and Lori's sister, Summer Shiflett. We know that was all recorded. Well, Scott Reich of Crime Talk on YouTube has the affidavit with the transcript posted on his public website. I read through it and found some interesting points, and on today's video, we are going to talk about it. Welcome to Left Undone Incomplete Investigations. I'm Kathryn. If you're new, stick around. Please like, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. We follow this case deeper than anyone on YouTube. So let's get started talking about this transcript with Summer Shiflett and Rob Wood. Hello and welcome back. Filed last week was the affidavit with the transcript. It's a bit confusing to read, but I want to point out some things that I found interesting. So we're going to go through it. This affidavit starts out and is from Garrett Smith, the attorney for Zulema and Summer. As we go through this transcript, it has a lot of ums and ahs and mistypes, and it's really hard to just read and see how it flows. So I'm going to try to explain it by paraphrasing and quoting at the same time to tell you how I was able to make it flow so it made sense for me. So Woods points out to Summer, when talking about Tylee and JJ, he said, "We were the ones that knew everything about the case, so they assigned us on that." He explains this is because they were last seen in Rexburg. Because remember, this meeting's taking place in Arizona, and there's a lot of stuff that went on in Arizona, but he's explaining this is why we were assigned. The last place they were seen was in Rexburg. He immediately says, "I'm just going to tell you right now, we are going to be filing conspiracy to commit murder charges for both Chad and Lori." So this clears that up for all of us have been wondering, are these murder charges coming? He very clearly states they are coming. Thank God, it looks like they are. Okay. So then Garrett is sitting there, Garrett Smith, Summer's attorney, and he says, okay. So Wood continues, "We are not shy about that. We've told both attorneys." So according to Wood, Mark Means and John Pryor know these charges are coming. They are coming. He goes on to say that Pryor keeps pretending like I never said that. He says to Summer, "But we have to." Then he tells them that he wants to give them a little background on where they are. He said, "We know this is not the same Lori everyone else knew. What is so strange to me is everyone we talked to, everyone who knew Lori, said she was primary president, she made quilts for kids, she made everything fun, everyone loved her, and she loved everyone." So remember, he's talking to Summer about the fact that they think, and he agrees, that what people are saying is this isn't the same Lori that everyone knew and loved all of her life. Summer then says, "Great mom," meaning Lori was a great mom. So clearly, Rob Wood and Summer are trying to paint a what happened to Lori picture, basically who jacked her head up so much to have her head flip into this terrible zombie-believing, murdering mother like, what happened to Lori to get her here to this place if she was always such a good person. He makes mention of Colby, saying, the woman in that jail is not my mom. She is someone else. So Colby has also said, this is not the same mother I have always had. She's someone else. Summer agrees. Yeah. Rob Wood then says, on the flip side of that is, I shouldn't say the flip side, but I want to be clear. He said, I'm not going to pull any punches or on any defendant in this case. I have my job to do. And Summer agrees and says, yeah. He goes on to say, but we want the truth, the whole truth, and the context of it. Then he asks Summer if she ever met Chad Daybell. She replies that she met him once at a Preparing a People event. Now remember, Preparing a People were these events they would go to, and Chad would speak and sign books, and Lori was there, and Melanie Gibb, and David Warwick, and all these people would come together in these gatherings and talk about this belief system or whatever their belief system was at the time. I believe it was an LDS event that could have had any kind of fringe type talking or whatever, but that's where Summer met Chad Daybell, at a Preparing a People event. She explains that her mom and her husband went to this event to support Lori, and Lori was there to support, she says, Mel, so Melanie Gibb. She said they met him there and talked to him for about 90 seconds after he had spoken at the event. She also states that Chad called her. So Chad called Summer when Lori got transferred from Hawaii to Idaho jail. He had texted her to say Lori wanted to talk to her. So apparently she gets a hold of Lori and speaks to her. So she calls Lori and speaks to her. Then she said the second she hung up with Lori, Chad called Summer to ask about bail. So reaching out, I guess, to get financial help for Lori's bail. That we know now never happened. Summer goes on to say, I have talked to him maybe 3 times briefly on the phone. She makes certain to clarify that it was never a long conversation. But then she said the first thing Chad tells her is, Lori hasn't told me much about the kids, so there's not really much I can say about that. Lori doesn't tell me much about the kids, so there's not really much I could say about that. Sorry, I had to do my Chad impression there. Rob's like, yeah, of course he said that. Summer says, mm-hmm. So just my thought on that. Chad is clearly trying to say he had no clue what really happened to the kids because Lori never talks to him about that. They don't have late night portal conversations about what happened to Lori's kids. He just marries her, flies off, goes, avoids media, watches her get arrested, never asks her, oh no, baby, I don't want to talk about that. You don't want to know. So he's saying, Lori never told me. That's funny considering where the bodies were found. Okay, Chad, you can try. With that comment, Wood says, well, welcome to Chad Daybell. So we all know, it's very clear that Chad blame shifts. Chad, me? What? I didn't know. So we have to agree, look at him slyly telling Summer he doesn't know about the kids. Summer says, I have my own opinions on him. Don't get me wrong. And Rob Wood says, I bet you do. He then says that Chad is highly manipulative. And Summer says, yes, he is. So then at this point, Rob Wood basically insults Chad's intelligence, but he points out that he is very manipulative, but not very intelligent. He says, I'm not going to say he's highly intelligent, But you don't have to be highly intelligent to be highly manipulative. Summer says, absolutely. Then Rob Wood again points this out again. He's trying to make this point very clear. He says he is extremely manipulative. And you know, your sister manipulated him in some ways too, but the context for everything that happened came from Chad. And Summer agrees. Absolutely. Yes, she says absolutely. Rob Wood says, we have enough evidence to prosecute him. We do. But the case against your sister is stronger. So he's trying to tell her, look, the case against your sister is stronger than Chad. He continues by saying, but I just kind of want to give you like that background. That's the kind of context that we see with this guy. He points out that Chad didn't care who died. Summer says, Rob Wood continues that Chad didn't care. He didn't care who died. He didn't care who got hurt. He didn't care at all. Then he says, and the other thing I can tell you is your sister truly believes that everything she's done has been done in righteousness. And Summer says, I know. Rob Wood says, I know I'm kind of using LDS speak. And Garrett says, Garrett's still there. Garrett says, yeah. Summer then says, 100%. That's my interpretation also. I think 100% she believes. So Summer's convinced that Lori is doing this all in the name of righteousness, and she 100% believes that what she did was the right thing to do. Rob Wood says, she believes it. And Summer says, Then Rob Wood says, every once in a while you see kind of a little crack, like in a jail phone call. And Summer responds, well, you've heard our conversations too. You know that I get that she's not fully aware of what she's really done. And Rob Wood says, right, yeah. Then Summer says again, I don't think she is. So Summer's just like, Rob Wood, well, she doesn't know what she's done. She doesn't know what she's done. I don't think she is. She doesn't feel that Lori is aware of what she does, the enormity or the fact that she's actually murdered her children. I guess that's what I'm getting from this. But Rob Wood said, I'm going to say this. I think she does know what she's done. He said, and I quote, I think she knows what she's done. Then Summer said, she knew enough to lie to us about it. So there, Summer's clearly agreeing that Lori did realize she's done something wrong. Rob Wood says, right, yeah, but the context under which it was done was this, religious. Just these ideas were out there, he says. He says, I can say this because I'm LDS. This had no basis in the LDS faith. He points out that Summer knows this and has said this in phone calls with Lori. Then he goes on to say thank you, and he tells her, so, that's where we're at, and they're all grateful for her coming in, and it's going to be hard to talk about these things, and Summer's like, oh yeah, it's going to be hard. And Rob Wood says, we know that they're going to be, you're not being a person of interest. So this confuses me a little bit. What does this mean? Does this mean Summer is not a person of interest or she is a person of interest? The way it's worded is, we know that, and they're gonna be, you're not being a person of interest. What does that mean? And then Garrett says, yeah, we've had this conversation, so. And then Rob Wood says, but part of what we need to do is understand. Well, he says, when you have a case like this, it's not just like a meth case. I probably had meth and nobody cares who you are. Summer said, no, there's no drugs, no alcohol. It's just, and then Rob goes on to say, we need to understand the context of who these people are. He wants the background. He wants the down and dirty. He wants to know who's involved. He wants to know what this belief system is. And he says, so that's a lot of what they're going to be asking about. He's telling Summer, that's what they're going to be asking you. And Summer says, okay, I'll do my best. Rob Wood says, like I said, it won't be easy. I know it's going to be a hard interview. He's making sure that she realized that this stuff will be difficult. Then Summer has a question. Summer says, I was wondering if you would be willing to if you're able to tell me if there's any progress in what you know about Tylee and her death. But is there any progress in her autopsy where you'd understand better? And then she says, I mean, do you have a cause yet or close to one? And Rob Wood said, she's at the FBI state-of-the-art crime lab. Unfortunately, there's a lot of diseased bodies there that they're going through. And then Summer's like, oh, I'm sure. And like with COVID, there's a lot of diseased bodies and different things going on that things are piling up. So Summer's like, oh yeah, I'm sure. Then Rob Wood says, we don't know really anymore yet. We may never know due to the destruction of that body. And yeah, we hope we'll find out, but we may not. But obviously we know it's her. There was soft tissue that was still preserved enough for us to do for them to do DNA tests on. And Summer says, yeah, the way you guys found them, like we wouldn't have ever known. And Garrett says, yeah. And Summer says, and I would have never dreamed that she would hurt them. So, Prosecutor Rob Wood says, you know what? Everyone says that. And Summer says, yeah. He said, that's what everyone says. Everyone says that. I would never have. So it's really a tragic thing. So they're referring to Lori, like everyone says she would have never done that. That's not what Lori would ever do, you know. So then he's pointing at that. So look how tragic this is. And Summer agrees. It really is, yeah. And he says, but again, I just want you to know how grateful we are. I know you don't have to talk to us. And so we're just grateful that you're willing to and helping us in that way. I'm sure kind of difficult knowing they're asking for information that's going to help them in the case against your sister. So it's like, I know this is tough. We're asking for information that's going to help prosecute your sister. But he points out, as a reminder, I guess the thing I want you to know is our whole goal is just justice for these kids. And Summer says, yeah. He goes on to let Summer know that Lori has basically dropped some hints at times. He said, your sister has actually made some overtures that she might be willing to talk to us. Summer says, I hope she does. I pray for that all the time. Rob Wood says, we hope she does. She actually was talking with Chad about talking with us before we found the bodies, just a few days before, and he talked her out of it. Summer says, Rob Wood says, which is too bad. It would have been better for her to tell us. Garrett pipes in, yep, it sure would have been. And Summer says, I agree. Rob Wood says, I mean, we were actually just finishing up our warrant on the date she said that. We were just getting ready to go out that day. That would have been even better. And he talked her out of it. Chad talked her out of it. Chad talked Lori out of telling them anything. Summer then says, yeah. And then Rob Wood says, and the night before she says to him again, so the night before she had said to him again, what do you think about you know? And he used this kind of, Rob Wood says, and he used this kind of, I call it spiritual abuse, spiritual manipulation. And Summer says, yeah. Oh, Rob Wood says, we've all seen that guy in the LDS religion whose wife has to obey him because the priesthood type thing. He said, and that's not what it says, but it's the same type of thing. So Rob's pointing out that that guy, the manipulative husband, using religion here in a frowned upon way. Basically manipulating her, saying that he is the one with visions and he can guide them because of his visions. And Garrett's like, So then Rob Wood says, so anyway, again, I just wanted to meet with you real quick and introduce myself and Mackenzie. And Summer says, I would have obviously seen you. And Rob Wood says, yes. He says, I don't take any joy in doing anything that's going to harm her. I don't take any joy in her spending her life in prison. Summer says, it hurts to think about her being in there. And Rob Wood says, there's nothing good about a case like this. Summer says, there's nothing good about it. And prosecutor goes on to say, and you know what? Even if you win a case, you take to trial and you win. So like a case like this, you take it to trial and you win. He says, even at the end, you're like, well, nothing good has happened. Because people are dead, lives are ruined. Clearly, that's what he means. He says it's all bad. And Garrett agrees, yeah. Summer says it's all bad. So Rob Wood says, we were able to put them in jail with a high bail on these lower charges and put together a case. Now our goal is to have such a strong case that when she has competent counsel, speaking of Mark Means not being competent here, he goes on to explain that Mark Means has never handled a felony case before. And Summer's like, And then he said he's never done any meaningful criminal work at all. And he doesn't know what he's doing. He says he's a nice guy. And Summer says, yeah, I met him. And then Rob's like, well, yeah, he's a nice guy. He points that out, but he's like, other than when he's lying about me. And he says again, then he goes on to say, but he doesn't know what he's doing. And once we file further charges, she will be appointed counsel who will know what they are doing. And our goal, he says, is to put together such a case that they're smart enough to say, it's going to be better to talk. And Summer says, Then Rob Wood, talking about the case being strong and that would be better for them to talk, he lets her know that once they had this case all, I don't know, my words, packaged up and ready to go, he said it would be much better for them to talk. He says it will make it easier for everyone. And then he says, make it easier, especially, for Colby. And then he points out that if anyone surrounding this case has lost everything, it's Colby. Then he thanks her again for coming in, and Summer speaks and says, it's weird to be on the prosecution and the defense side at the same time because I love everybody. And Prosecutor Rob Wood says, well, it's a system. He said he did defense work for 5 years, and he said, and I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was kind of fun. And then Garrett pipes in and says, I like defending. And Rob Wood says, just because someone's committed a crime doesn't mean they're a horrible person. Summer says, so I'm torn, and it's such a conflicting feeling to know that this person has been good her whole life and then has made this error in judgment and got sucked into this vortex of this man, meaning Chad. She says, I feel for her. I just have so much compassion towards her because I know that's not what she would have ever done on her own. And so she has to pay the price for this forever. And I hate that for her. So I'm very conflicted. Then Summer goes on to say she has another question for Rob about the conspiracy to commit murder. She asks, what's the weight of that in terms of judgment? Is that a death penalty kind of thing? And Rob Wood says, it is a death penalty case in Idaho. And Summer says, are you planning to ask that for them? or do you not want to? And Rob says, we sure hope we don't. A lot of that will depend on her. It's like, come on, Lori. Summer, tell your sister to talk. It's going to be better. That's what I'm getting from this. It continues to explain that that decision wouldn't be made now. It wouldn't be made until after a case is filed. So then he says, we have a couple of months. Because a lot of times when you file it, it's out there, it's on the table. Oftentimes, he says, that's a big motivator for people to get together and talk and try to resolve it. And he said, and that's what we hope happens. Then he talks about how a case could wind up with the endless appeals and that the Woodcack family, referring to the other family, that would just be so hard for them because the case never resolves. And Garrett agrees. And then Rob Wood says, it just kind of, well, you appeal this and then you appeal that and it can go on forever. So we're sure hoping that that is not what goes on here. He doesn't want to go down that route. He says, not that I won't. He said, if we look at trial, I might, but we haven't made up our minds on that. And then he says, we really don't want to. And he says, I can tell you that from the bottom of my heart. So Summer says, knowing her, speaking of Lori, if she comes out of this state, like this mental state Summer believes she's in, and realizes the weight of it, she may prefer that, honestly. I think about that all the time with her just because of what she's been through. I just can't. So she's thinking if Lori does realize what she's done, she may just want to be dead anyway. Give me the death penalty. He says, I know you know a lot more about Lori than I do, but we have learned a lot about Lori. He said, I mean, there's some things that happened in her life, I think, that play into this. And then Summer agrees, oh, definitely. Then Summer says, yeah, I think you see it for what it is. I don't know how you couldn't because you've been interviewing everybody. Then Rob Wood points out that he was there when the arrest happened in Hawaii, when the order to produce the children was served. And he said, and I was there when they served the search warrants. And he said, when the news showed up, he said, I was super annoyed by, he said, it just blows everything right up. Oops, sorry for Nate, but Nate's interview in Hawaii was classic. So sorry, Rob. Just like Rob, Nate has a job to do, right? So we all appreciate that interview. And he says to Summer, you know, your sister can put on a brave face. And Summer says, oh yeah. Rob Wood says, we were like, oh, does this guy know what he's gotten himself into? And Summer's like, mm-hmm. And Wood describes Lori as she was just very stoic, I'm not going to say a word. That's Lori's demeanor in that whole thing. And then he said, but Chad, he looked like he was about to pee his pants because he's actually a wimpy person, Rob Wood says. Summer says, yeah. Rob Wood says, he's wimpy, yeah? And Summer's like, yeah. And Rob Wood says, he's great if he has someone else to do something for him, but he himself is a wimpy person. He explains to her that at the time they were like, this is all Lori, this is all her. In the beginning, they all felt like this is all Lori, this is all her. And they were asking themselves, how on earth is she manipulating this guy, basically? How is she manipulating this guy, Chad? He says, but then, once we dug into that was the beginning, and we were starting to get the facts, and as we got more facts, then they're beginning to realize that maybe Chad is the master manipulator here. He said, I'm not going to pull punches if I have to go to trial, but these ideas came from him. And Summer says, oh yeah. Rob Wood says she had some different views on theology and standard LDS by that point, but he really knew how to manipulate that and turn it into something even more. Summer says his influence was there before she met him. And Rob Wood said, yeah, she was reading his books. And Summer says, well, it wasn't just his books. So it was like the Julie Rowe podcasts. She goes on to talk about Julie Rowe. And she says, he gave, meaning Chad, gave Julie Rowe a lot of her ideas. And so when she would listen to Julie Rowe, she was getting to Chad's ideas by listening to this. So listening to Julie Rowe was indoctrinating her into Chad's ideas, right? And Rob Wood said, Julie Rowe, she's interesting. And Summer said, I've heard some of her podcasts. When she started talking about herself in the third person all the time, I'm like, And Rob Wood said, yeah, I've listened to her podcast as well. They're interesting stuff. And then Garrett pipes in, apparently the comedian of the bunch, with his humor. And he says, Garrett doesn't like when people talk about themselves in the third person. A little humor, I guess. Garrett thrown in there. Humor there. And then Rod Wood says he will let them get going. And then Summer offers them all some wristbands because they have Tylee and JJ wristbands that she's made or ordered. And they want some and they have a lot and yada, yada, yada. So they're going to take these wristbands back to Rexburg. And then they talk about that. He says, you know, it's interesting how you can in Rexburg. Those kids weren't there very long, he says, but there are kids. And Garrett says, yeah. Summer says, anytime there are kids involved, it's not okay. And Rob Wood said, so thank you. And then Garrett says, you know, there's not one of us that doesn't want to protect the kids. And Rob Wood's like, yeah, right. And Garrett says, for sure. And so they're all just agreeing that this is terrible. Anytime there's kids involved, it's awful. So I think at that point, they went in to meet with the investigators, and Wood didn't go into that meeting. Now, we also know that there maybe is a conversation like this with Zulema that we haven't been privy to. So that brings you up to speed on the transcript that Mark Means thinks is so horrendous and so terrible and so bad that Rob Wood needs to be removed. So I don't see anything there for that. Do you? Let's talk about it. Put it in the chat. The hearing for Rob Wood's possible dismissal is now on January 6th instead of the change of venue case that was scheduled. So we'll figure out what's going on in January 6th, but it will be closed. Thank you for watching Left Undone. Be sure to click like and subscribe if you aren't a subscriber. You won't want to miss a moment of this case because I believe we're still just getting started. Be safe, stay well, and stay home for now. See you soon